record. Awesome. All right. Thank you for doing that survey, Shirley. Oh, excuse me. So if you're on Summit, you should all now have checkpoint 2 assigned to you right here that says reading journal my life with the wave. And so if you click the link right here, it'll bring you to the checkpoint that looks like this. All right. And you can also access the story from Summit as well. If you scroll down and you'll see right here, it says my life with the wave text. You click that and it'll bring you to the story right here. Okay. So this is a story that we're going to try to read today. So I'll give everybody a minute or two yet and see if you can pull that up in Summit. All right. When we read the story, I'll be sharing my screen so you can follow along that way. So if you're on your phone or you're not at Summit right now, that's okay. But if you are and you want to pull it up to follow along on your end, feel free. Again, you're going right here to checkpoint 2. So take like another minute. And pull that up, okay? And again, if you're working on those testimonials, you can send that in a private chat to Ms. Kelsey while you're waiting or while pulling this up. But what we are, talking about today, what we've been talking about, if you have been with us, is this idea of an allegory, right? We've talked about this a little bit already. Can anybody who was with us remind us, either in the chat or coming off mute, what an allegory is? Can you provide us with a definition? We know that it's a type of story, right? But it's a type of story that does a specific thing. Do we remember what that is? Anybody who can help us out and provide a definition? Any thoughts out there? Or any best guesses as to what an allegory is? Remember, we talked about a few examples of famous examples of them. One was Moby Dick, one was Life of Pi, one was Animal Farm. So again, we know an allegory is a type of story, not quite poetry. It's a type of story. So usually it's like a novel or a short story. And it's a type of story that, uses, or does a specific thing. Think about like Moby Dick, for example, and we have the big white whale. Do we think that whale is supposed to represent something else? What do we call that? When one thing in a story represents something bigger. What do we think? Come on, you guys. I think you guys know this. What's it called when you have something in a story that represents something else? Starts with an S. What do we call that? Are we live out there still? That's usually what it's always my question.
A story?
Not a story, but another word that starts with an S. It could be maybe an object. It could be, maybe an animal. It could be, an idea. But what do we call it when we have something in a story that is supposed to represent something else, something a little bit bigger? Starts with an S. Like Captain America's shield could be one of these. It's what? Because it represents a bigger idea.
I really think you guys know the answer to this.
I think maybe it's just a little too early yet.
Yeah, it's too early for me. I get it.
A sim, what? Come on, you guys know this.
A synonym.
Not a synonym.
It's actually kind of like a synonym, though. You know what I mean? Like it's one thing that means the same thing in a way.
A syllable.
No.
Getting colder.
Shorter. Think about like
here's a good one. The Statue of Liberty is a blank of
A statue.
it is a statue.
But of freedom, right, and liberty. It means that. What is that when it means something else?
What do we call that? Like if it represents those ideas or ideals, but it's an object. What do we call that?
I wouldn't say a sign, but I know it's something else.
You're getting closer.
You're close, yeah. A sign or what? What's another short?
When I see this thing, I think of this other thing. It is a.
Hold up. So I can't I can't go. I'm tired.
I would have trouble too if I was listening to kids' music, so I get that.
Yeah.
Very distracting.
I put the first half of the word I'm looking for in the chat, so maybe that helps.
Symbol.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah, symbol. So, like the Statue of Liberty is a symbol for freedom. Captain America's shield is a symbol for America. You know, other things like
Why
that.
didn't you use the Marvel reference? I would have got it there.
I did. You missed it. I said it like twice.
You did.
Yeah. Loki is a symbol for beauty and handsomeness, obviously, Shirley.
Duh.
But yes, so we're talking about a symbol, something that represents something bigger. And an allegory is a type of story that uses a symbol to kind of tell a bigger story or represent a bigger theme or idea. So that's why some of those examples, like Moby Dick, right? The white whale is kind of a symbol that might represent, you know, the captain's fear of, you know, getting older, or like something that he has never been able to do. And then, you know, Animal Farm is a story that tells, you know, the story of the Russian Revolution, but it uses farm animals to do it. Life of Pi, like the tiger, might symbolize, you know, the young man's fear of, like, you know, coming to another country. And he's kind of wrestling with that. So that is what, you know, an allegory is. So the allegory we are going to read for checkpoint 2, it's called, as I share my screen here, My Life with the Wave, okay, by Octavia Paz. So what I would also like to ask is, just based on that title alone, right? You know, can you make a prediction as to what you think the wave might symbolize, right? So we now know that an allegory is a story with a symbol that kind of is painting a bigger picture, telling a, you know, representing a bigger theme or idea. So what do we think just based on that title alone, what do you think the wave is going to symbolize here in this story? What could it be an allegory for? Any initial thoughts or predictions? And there's no right or wrong here. I'm just curious. Hey Denim, welcome. What do we think just based on the title, what can we predict the wave might represent? What do we think it's going to symbolize? Any thoughts or guesses? You can put them in the chat. You can come off mute. Ocean waves, true. All right, so we're probably talking about specific waves from the ocean. And what else could ocean waves maybe be symbolic of, do you think, Shirley, or anybody else? But what other kind of meaning could ocean waves have? Think of specifically about, if somebody's in a relationship with somebody else, what are the kind of traits or characteristics that a wave has that maybe a relationship might have?
The ups and downs.
Definitely the ups and downs, the chaos, the trauma. The something that came to mind last class when we were talking about this is, I don't know if any of you know who Bruce Lee is, but he's very famous, probably the most famous like kung fu movie actor from the 70s. But he has a very famous quote where he says, you have to be like water, because water can be very fluid and beautiful, but it can also crash and be very harsh at the same time. And so that's kind of what we think about when we think about waves, something that can be very fluid and moving and beautiful, but it can also, crash onto land and be very harsh and sometimes even deadly, right? And so we can see a lot of that in relationships too. So really good stuff. Let's keep that in mind, okay? And again, if you're just joining us, you can access the story on Summit. Creative Writing, What is Love is our project. And then you should have checkpoint 2 assigned to you right here, Reading Journal, My Life with the Wave. And then if you scroll down, you'll see it says My Life with the Wave text. We can access the story right here, okay? So we're gonna try and read through as much of this as we can get through. And then I'll explain what you're gonna do for checkpoint 2, right? I will be reading and you can follow along on my screen share, or if you want to pull it up on your end, that's fine too. When I left that sea, a wave moved ahead of the others. She was tall and light, in spite of the shouts of the others who grabbed her by her floating skirts. She clutched my arm and went leaping off with me. I didn't want to say anything to her because it hurt me to shame her in front of her friends. Besides, the furious stares of the larger waves paralyzed me. When we got to town, I explained to her that it was impossible, that life in the city was not what she had been able to imagine, with all the ingenuousness of a wave that had never left the sea. She watched me gravely. No, her decision was made. She couldn't go back. I tried sweetness, harshness, irony. She cried, screamed, hugged, threatened. I had to apologize. So just based on that first paragraph alone already, what do we notice about how the author is talking about the wave? Is he talking about the wave like it's an act, like it's just a wave, or is he talking about the wave like it's an actual person? What do we think? Look at this, first paragraph here. Look at, the articles he's using. We see a lot of she's and hers, and, she screamed and threatened. I had to apologize. So is he talking about it like it's an ocean wave, or is he talking about it like it's an actual person with thoughts and feelings? What does it look like? Yes, Shirley, I just saw your chat. Bruce Lee is indeed the old version of Jackie Chan. One might say the original version of Jackie Chan. What do we think? How is he talking about the wave? Just in this first paragraph here. Is he talking about it, describing it like it's just a wave, like it's regular water, or is he talking about it like it's an actual person with thoughts and feelings? What does it seem? And I can read it again one more time if you aren't sure. When I left the sea, a wave moved ahead of the others. She was tall and light. In spite of the shouts of the others who grabbed her by her floating skirts, she clutched my arm and went leaping off with me. I didn't want to say anything to her because it hurt me to shame her in front of her friends. Besides, the furious stares of the larger waves paralyzed me. When we got to town, I explained to her that it was impossible, that life in the city was not what she had been able to imagine with all of the ingenuousness of a wave that had never left the sea. She watched me gravely. No, her decision was made. She couldn't go back. I tried sweetness, harshness, irony. She screamed, cried, hugged, threatened. I had to apologize. So, what do we think? Is he talking about the wave like it's just a wave or like it's an actual person? How does he seem to be describing the wave? What do you think? Anybody out there who can help us out?
Looks like Mr. V got bumped out, but I'm sure he'll be right back. Oh yeah, he just texted me. He said my Wi-Fi kicked me out. Sorry, I'll be right back on. In the meantime, Shirley's so cynical. And he's back.
Yes, I apologize.
No
Sorry.
worries.
All right. Let me pull the story back up. So we were saying the way the author is kind of describing the wave in this first paragraph here. Is he talking about the wave like it's just a wave or like it's another real actual person? What does it seem like to you guys? Can anybody tell me in the chat or come off mute? What do you think? If we look at, if you look at some of the words in the articles he's using here, she, I don't want to say anything to her. It hurt me to shame her. She couldn't go back. She screamed and hugged and threatened. I had to apologize to her. Is that stuff, are those kind of words you would use if you're just talking about a regular wave? Or are they more words you would use if you're talking about an actual person? What do you think? Is there anyone alive out there who has a thought about this?
Wait, can you repeat that?
Let me see. Did you put something in the chat?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Lisa, can you look at that? So, again, if you couldn't hear, the question we're talking about is, if we look at just this first paragraph here, how does it seem like the author is talking about the wave? Is he talking about it like it's just a regular wave, or is he talking about it more like it's an actual person?
It's an actual person.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's an actual person, because he's calling it, he's assigning it, a gender. He's saying she, and he's telling it, how how the wave feels. All things we associate with, an actual person, not, an inanimate object like a wave. Does anyone recall the word we use when the word we use to describe the literary device or type of figurative language where we give human-like qualities to things that aren't human?
Personification.
Yes, excellent job. Got on the first try. Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, personification. The way I always remember that is it has the word person in it. So when you assign things that a person would do to something that's not a person, that is personification. So yes, he's personifying the wave in this first paragraph. So that should already give us a hint as to, why this story is an example of an allegory, because he's using the wave to kind of represent or symbolize something else. So as we continue to read, we'll see maybe what that will be. All right, good job. The next day, my troubles began. How could we get on the train without being seen by the conductor, the passengers, the police? It's true, the rules say nothing in respect to the transport of waves on the railroad, but this very reserve was an indication of the severity with which our act would be judged. After much thought, I arrived at the station an hour before departure. I took my seat, and when no one was looking, emptied the tank of the drinking fountain. Then, carefully, I poured in my friend. The first incident arose when the children of a couple nearby loudly declared their thirst. I blocked their way and promised them refreshments and lemonade. They were at the verge of accepting when another thirsty passenger approached. I was about to invite her too, but the stare of her companion stopped me short. The lady took a paper cup, approached the tank, and turned the faucet. Her cup was barely half full. When I leaped between the woman and my friend, she looked at me in astonishment. While I apologized, one of the children turned the faucet again. I closed it violently. The lady brought the cup to her lips. Ah, this water is salty. The boy echoed her. Various passengers rose. The husband, called the conductor. This man put salt in the water, because remember, it's a wave from the ocean, so it's going to be salt water. The conductor called the inspector. So you've placed substances in the water? The inspector called the police. So you've poisoned the water? And the police in turn called the captain. So you're the poisoner? The captain called 3 agents. The agents took me to an empty car amidst the stares and whispers of the passengers. At the next station, they took me off and pushed me and dragged me to jail. For days, no one spoke to me except during the long interrogations. No one believed me when I explained my story, not even the jailer, who shook his head, saying, "The case is grave, truly grave. You weren't trying to poison children?" One day, they brought me before the magistrate. "Your case is difficult," he repeated. "I will assign you to the penal judge." A year passed. Finally, they tried me. As there were no victims, my sentence was light. After a short time, my day of freedom arrived. The warden called me in. "Well, now you're free. You were lucky. Lucky there were no victims. But don't let it happen again, because the next time, you'll really pay for it." And he stared at me with the same solemn stare with which everyone watched me. That same afternoon, I took the train and, after hours of uncomfortable traveling, arrived in Mexico City. I took a cab home. the door of my apartment, I heard laughter and singing. I felt a pain in my chest, like the smack of a wave of surprise when surprise smacks us in the chest. My friend was there, singing and laughing, as always. How did you get back? Easy, on the train. Someone, after making sure that I was only salt water, poured me into the engine. It was a rough trip. As soon as I was a white plume of vapor, then I fell in a fine rain on the machine. I thinned out a lot. I lost many drops. Her presence changed my life. The house of dark corridors and dusty furniture was filled with air, with sun, with green and blue reflections, a numerous and happy populace of reverberation and echoes. How many waves one wave is, and how it can create a beach or rock or jetty out of a wall, a chest, a forehead, that it crowns with foam. Even the abandoned corners, the abject corners of dust and debris, were touched by her light hands. Everything began to laugh, and everywhere white teeth shone. The sun entered the old rooms with pleasure and stayed for hours when it should have left the other houses, the district, the city, the country. And some nights, very late, the scandalized stars would watch it sneak out of my house. Love was a game, a perpetual creation. Everything was beach, sand, a bed with sheets that were always fresh. If I embraced her, she would swell with pride, incredibly tall like the liquid stalk of a poplar, and soon that thinness would flower into a fountain of white feathers, into a plume of laughs that fell over my head and back and covered me with whiteness. Or she would stretch out in front of me, infinite as the horizon, until I too became horizon and silence. Full and sinuous, she would envelop me like music or some giant lips. Her presence was a going and coming of caresses, of murmurs, of kisses. Plunging into her waters, I would be drenched to the socks, and then, in the wink of an eye, find myself high above, at a dizzying height, mysteriously suspended, to fall like a stone, and feel myself gently deposited on dry land like a feather. Nothing is comparable to sleeping rocked in those waters, unless it is walking pounded by 1,000 happy light lashes, by 1,000 assaults that withdraw laughing. So, how does the relationship between the man and the wave, how does it seem so far to this point? Do they seem like they're happy? What do you think? Based on his description, how does it seem the wave has made him feel since coming into his life? Has it been a good thing or a bad thing? Or have I put you all to sleep with my velvety reading voice?
It is nice to hear you reading to us. Shirley says bad.
You think it's a bad thing? Let's go back and look at some of the stuff he says, right? All right. Her presence changed my life. The house of dark corridors and dusty furniture was filled with air, with sun, with green and blue reflections, and a numerous and happy populace of reverberations and echoes. How many waves one wave is, and how it can create a beach or rock or jetty out of a wall, chest, forehead that it crowns with foam. Even the abandoned corners, the abject corners of dust and debris, were touched by her light hands. Everything began to laugh, and everywhere white teeth shone. The sun entered the old rooms with pleasure and stayed for hours when it should have left the other houses, the district, the city, the country. And some nights very late, the scandalized stars would watch it sneak out of my house. So if he's saying her presence changed my life, now all the dark parts and the dusty corners of my house, now they're kind of filled with sun and laughter, and happiness. So does that seem like the wave coming into his life has been a bad thing or a good thing? If that's how he's describing the way his life and his house has changed, what do you think? Does it seem like the wave has brought some joy into his life up to this point? Yeah. So I think we could say good, now that may change as we get further in the story, but I think up to this point, definitely we can see it is, kind of have brought him joy. So think about, um, Zenillia says both bad and good. So why do you say both bad and good, Zenillia? That's interesting. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Because the wave was some good experiences with some good memories, and it brought bad experiences along with some bad memories. So I
Okay.
say,
What's one of the bad experiences we've seen so far?
oh my
Like,
God,
oh, go ahead. Like maybe when he was in jail for a little bit because he was trying to transport the wave on the train. That could definitely be, a bad experience, I think. So I think, yeah, I think you're right. Definitely good and bad. It seems like right now it's kind of more good, and he's kind of more kind of like smitten by the wave. So what I think about is thinking about if when you're single, and you're alone, maybe you don't care that much about the way your house looks, and maybe you're a little bit depressed. Like he says, I have dark corridors and dusty corners. And then you meet a new partner, you're in a new relationship. Now you have this joy. It's kind of like that honeymoon phase. You're very excited. You're together all the time. That seems to kind of be what is happening here with him and the wave. Because remember, at the end of the day, this project is all about love and how we write about it, the different ways we can portray our thoughts and feelings about it. So the story is obviously going to have something to do with that. All right. So I'll read the rest of this page and then we'll stop. So that's a good place to stop. So we'll be at the top of page 31. And then I'll quickly go over what we're going to do for checkpoint 2. And then we should be able to wrap up. Okay. But I never reached the center of her being. I never touched the nakedness of pain and of death. Perhaps it does not exist in waves, that secret place that renders a woman vulnerable and mortal, that electric button where everything interlocks, twitches, straightens out, and then swoons. Her sensibility, like that of women, spread in ripples. Only they weren't concentric ripples, but rather eccentric ones that spread further each time until they touched other galaxies. To love her was to extend to remote contacts, to vibrate with far-off stars we never suspect. But her center, no, she had no center, just an emptiness like a whirlwind that sucked me in and smothered me. Stretched out side by side, we exchanged confidences, whispers, smiles. Curled up, she fell on my chest and unfolded there like a vegetation of murmurs. She sang in my ear, a little seashell. She became humble and transparent, clutching my feet like a small animal, calm water. She was so clear I could read all of her thoughts. On certain nights, her skin was covered with phosphorescence, and to embrace her was to embrace a piece of night tattooed with fire. But she also became black and bitter. So now we can see kind of a little bit of what Zenalia is talking about with maybe the good and bad, as is, a human relationship. There's good and there's bad. Sometimes you're super, in love with each other. Other times you're fighting, right? And your moods change. So we're going to stop there. So we're at the top of page 31. Okay. So what we're going to do for checkpoint 2, which I'm going to be looking for to be done by Monday, since no class tomorrow, and the second progress report is coming out next week. Okay. If you access checkpoint 2 on Summit, right here. Okay. What you'll see are 2 kind of sections for you to complete. The first one is very straightforward, just a matching section. So I have different, stuff, different details from the story, and you're going to match them with the corresponding letter in the answer key right here. So for example, the first one is Octavio Paz. So you would go down to the key, you would look at all the options, and you'd say, okay, which one of these closest matches the most close to Octavio Paz? I would put that letter on the line right here. Okay. And that's how you're doing the first part. And then the second part is just some open-ended questions. Okay, some of these we've already talked about, like how is my life with a wave an example of an allegory? And then again, you have to know what an allegory is, but we've already talked about that. And then, you know, a couple of the other ones here. So obviously we weren't able to get through the whole story today, so you'll need to finish that as well. But again, you can access it right from checkpoint 2 on Summit right here. If you click this link, it says My Life with a Wave text. All right. Any questions with any of that? With what the checkpoint is, where to find it, how to do it, anything like that? All right. I will be in the Summit Lab from 1 to 3 today. If you want to pop in there and get some more help, if you know you might not be able to read the story on your own over the weekend, and you want to read it with me in the lab today, that's fine too. But don't forget, no class, no lab tomorrow, because teachers have a super fun and exciting training day that we can't wait for. So if you want to do any of that kind of lab or afternoon help stuff, you know, today's the day to do it. Okay. And then I'm looking for checkpoint 2 to be done by Monday. So you got an extra day and the whole weekend to get that done. And then that's going to count for progress report number 2. Okay. Again, questions about anything. If you got them, now's the time to ask them. Because if I don't hear any, then I'm going to assume we are all good to go.
I'm good. Bye.
Shirley, thank you. All right, y'all. Well, thank you very much. Really good job. All right. So don't forget to try and get that done by Monday. And have a great long weekend. Stay safe. And I will see you all next time. Okay.
See you.
All right. Thank you, guys.